Installing the front wheel, basically you need to get the forks to be on the outside of this washer that's got a lug on the bottom that stops it turning once it's inside the fork. Same on this side. So once you've got the line, once it's lined up and the disc is also going straight through into the calipers, the forks then need to push down either side of those washers. So once it's dropped in, you'll see here that the lug just is in the groove of the actual fork itself, and then you just tighten the nuts and that's then finished. One quick thing to note is when assembling the caliper itself, what you want to do is be pressing the actual brake itself, the brake lever itself, whilst tightening these two bolts here, because what that does is it keeps the actual the alignment of the caliper perfectly square with the disc whilst you're tightening it up into place. First thing to do before putting the axle on is to put the chain over the front crank, through the derailleur and round the rear cassette, and then you can start offering the axle up to the frame itself. Once you've got the 4 bolts lined up, you can just slot it into position, which the place where it would finish is literally so that the rear of the actual frame is equal to just literally 1 or 2 millimeters from the actual axle itself, and then just tighten the bolts up, and that's then ready to get on to the next stage. A quick thing to mention before putting wheels onto the tricycle is the rear brake hub. So just here you can see that there's a nut already in place, and from the video I'm hoping you can see there's a flat edge on this axle bar which the bolt needs, the nut needs to actually tighten up to, so that once the brake is applied it can't spin on a rounded bar. Also, this actual inner of the hub, you can, once you undo this to set it, you can actually slide it along the bar where you want it, is literally so that it's just perhaps a couple of millimeters from being fully within the actual outer of the hub, so that it's not catching on the actual inner wall, sort of just on that inner edge. what this spring does is obviously releases the brake once the brake lever's released. So it actually creates a little bit of tension between the actual back of the brake lever, the brake caliper itself. And also there's adjustment in this here. So if you find that the spring is already too tight, you can actually adjust that and have it slightly further forwards or backwards than what it actually is set by the manufacturer. The rear right wheel of the tricycle, as you can just see here, has got a straight edge, and that needs to line up onto this straight edge, or either side of the actual rear axle bolt. It's got a straight edge on, so that has to go on that side. You'll know when it's on because it will only leave you literally around an inch of threaded bar for you to fix the nut onto. The rear left wheel should have, just on the inside of the tyre, a direction arrow, which means it needs to be that the tyre is actually facing that way forwards. There is in theory the option to put the wheel on either way, but the ideal is to have the tread in the right direction. Firstly, just slide the sleeve onto the axle, then the wheel, and then a washer, and then the Loctite nut. Assembling the wheel arches, you need 2 of these small nuts on each end, which go into the black vertical prop, of which there is a little bit of manipulation in the steel to make sure that the thread of the actual nut can reach it and tighten into it. And then the same on the central guides for the vertical props for the arch. Same threaded nut. Once you've built each arch, it should look like this. So you've got 2 nuts on each end and 2 central nuts on these vertical props. Now we'll show you how to attach it to the frame itself. Each arch is specific to its side, so you've got these 2 holes on the actual inside where the reflector would be on the rear, and those 2 slots need to line up with these diagonal slots, and where you want to try and get the nut and bolt, which we'll show you in a second, is as near to the top of them as possible to keep as much clearance between the arch and the tyre as possible. So here we're installing the nut and bolt to stabilise the arch, and as we've said in the previous clip, is you want the nuts to be as near to the top of those diagonal slots as possible to give you that clearance between the arch itself and the tyre. So this is now one of the wheel arches assembled, and as you can see there's good clearance between the tyre and the actual frame, the arch itself, and that's because what we've done is we've managed to get these 2 attaching nuts to be as high up on the diagonal slot as possible to give you that clearance. And what you sometimes find is there is a bit of adjustment needed so that the tyre is in the middle of the actual frame itself, the arch frame itself, so you want an equal amount here and then on the other side. And also there is a bit of adjustment as well on this top arch bar, so if you need to slide the actual arch left or right, you just undo these two nuts and literally just move it along and then retighten, and you should end up with something that looks like this, so it's clear on all four sides. Here we've got a basket, obviously, that's already been made up, but in short, all you basically do is put all the four sides on to connect to the base, and then these metal straps basically need wrapping around every corner, top and bottom, and also on the base as well, and that creates then a complete locked-in cage. You then sit the cage on the actual frame itself, or on the axle frame, where you can see there are 4 holes ready to attach this fixing plate, which again has the nuts ready to go through and be bolted in. Once those 2 straps are bolted in place, the basket is then complete and shouldn't move anywhere. The chain guard, as we've already installed, just one thing to note is there's a top and bottom screw which goes into this prop frame, which is designed to basically hold the chain guard in place, but just be aware that there is a little bit of manipulation in this actual prop itself, so you want it to be high enough so that the actual chain isn't catching on the bottom of the screw. So there's a little bit of movement in that just to make sure it's clear of it. Here we're just going to show you how to install the handlebars. So at the bottom of the stem there's a little diagonal shim which, when tightened up, locks the actual stem and keeps the handlebars aligned. So you slide the stem down into the headset itself, of which you can set the height to make it as comfortable as you like depending on how tall you are. And what you want to achieve is to keep the stem, this part of the headset, in line with the actual wheel, so that obviously it keeps you as straight as possible. This is the top of the headset itself, which the headset bolt needs to be really quite tight so that there's no movement. And then the same with the actual handlebars themselves, which here you can see there's quite a lot of movement, so that depending on how upright and how long your arms are, there's a bit of adjustment in the reach, so it would suit sort of people between around 5 feet and up to as tall as 6'2", 6'3". We've had people on and say they're still comfortable. Quick demonstration of the electronics part of the bike. So firstly, you need to have the key in and turned on the battery, and also the key on the handlebar electronics, which when the battery's full should be showing around the 40-41 reading. And then this left hand side gauge is basically to demonstrate how fast you're going, and also gives you the option to switch between the first, second and third power input. Also, you've got a light for the front of the bike, which is very bright, and also a little hooter. Okay, and then if you want to remove the battery, you turn your power off on the handlebars, and then here you'll be able to see that when you turn the key, there is an extra notch on the battery on the key, which you have to push in whilst you're turning it, and that releases that bolt that then allows you to take the battery out of the bike. So you pop the seat up by pressing this little lever upwards, undo your power cable, lift the handle, and out it comes. You should end up with something that looks like this. Just do bear in mind that if you are building it yourself and you're not using a shop, that the gears sometimes need a bit of adjustment from manufacturer settings, of which these two screws here on the right hand side of the derailleur, which is quite awkward to show you, just here, are what adjust the gears from the highest and the lowest gear setting, which are the only gears that you'd need to adjust, because any gear between the highest and lowest are always manufacturer set on a Shimano shifter. The other thing to note as well is on the brake, on the rear hub brake, there's a little nut here that you can see on the top and bottom, which gives a little bit of adjustment to the brake shoe itself. So if there's a bit of rubbing on the brake itself when you firstly start riding it, it can be either those, or it can be the fact that the actual inner of the hub is slid in too far and needs slightly adjusting to come out of the actual hub itself. And then again, this, which I said earlier on in the video, this nut will need re-tightening into position.